Keep in mind it is a very short symphony, so it will be over quickly if it's not really your bag of tea. From there, we move to the music of Franz Liszt, who was, of course, born in 1811, following a group of other composers that we like to group together. Mendelssohn is born in 1809, Chopin and Schumann are both born in 1810, and Liszt is born in 1811. And of course, we talked about this last month if you were here when we did Mendelssohn and Brahms, and I talked about how Mendelssohn is the most conservative of this group of four composers. If we look at Schumann, he's the most centrist of the group. He's a little progressive, but still fairly conservative. Chopin and Liszt, however, are the most progressive out of these four. So if we look at the music of these two composers and how do we maybe discern the difference between them, I think it comes down to their personalities. Chopin is an introvert. Liszt is horribly extroverted. That's really the difference, and we see it in their literature. Both wrote 2 piano concertos, but Chopin really didn't write a lot else for the concert hall. His music is really preserved in the home, in the parlor, in the recital hall, because he primarily wrote piano literature. And so that really doesn't necessarily speak of his liberalism or conservatism. What it really shows is talks about the format in which he was comfortable, which was more intimate. He's more introverted. He spent all that time on Mallorca. He enjoyed the isolation. Whereas Liszt was a showman. He had long hair. He was tall. He was good looking. Remember when I had long hair and I was tall and good looking? Thank you. Yeah, me too. It wasn't all that long ago, really. You know, but that speaks something of showmanship. People with long hair. What does that say? He doesn't have a regular job. So Liszt used this to his advantage. Thank you very much. Liszt used this to his advantage as part of his showmanship, and he would lean back with a rose between his teeth and play, and women would go, oh. Men too, actually. So you know, Liszt really is very much all about Liszt, about promoting himself and having his personality be out there in front. And of course, he could back up his bite. He was an amazing performer. He was one of the greatest concert pianists ever to have walked this planet. And he let everyone know every time he talked to him. He was a fantastic talent. And he contributed a lot to music, more than just piano literature. For example, he wrote choral music. He wrote one piece called the Missa Choralis, a mass that he wrote, that sounds much more like the music of Palestrina than a romantic virtuoso pianist. He wrote a lot of programmatic music also. Like preludes, Faust, of course, following in the model of Beethoven and the programmatic symphony, which got started with Symphony No. 6, the Pastoral. He's going to take that a step further. So we refer very often to his works as programmatic symphonies or a symphonic poem. And of course, that legacy is going to end up in Richard Strauss with the single movement tone poem. So we can kind of see where this is going with this. Things are moving in a different direction with many of his programmatic works. But today, we're going to hear Piano Concerto No. 2, which is not a programmatic work, it's a piano concerto. But it's very different from the usual mode of a piano concerto. See, Liszt is known for contributing something else to music, and that is a process in composition known as thematic transformation. Or what he does is he takes a thematic idea, and over the course of a piece of music, he's going to transform that idea. And he utilizes this in Piano Concerto No. 2 that we're going to hear today. It is not a typical 3-movement concerto, fast, slow, fast. Instead, it's more like a theme and variations. And that's really the genre where this thematic transformation idea came from. If we look back again at the classical period, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, these composers wrote a lot of things called themes and variations for the piano. And a theme and variations contains a theme, and then guess what? Variations on that theme. But here's the real trick. The theme is like the default. It's kind of what you refer back to mentally each time, and then each variation is then a reference back to that original theme. And it's a demonstration of how many different things you can do with music. If the original theme was subdivided in 2, Here's a variation in 3. Here's one in minor. Here's one with arpeggios. Here's one with chromaticism. Here's one with contrary motion. And there's all of these different elements that they can use to show off how many ways they can redistribute the same thematic material. Now, one of the conversations I have with myself, if thematic transformation is so cool, why doesn't everybody do it following Liszt? Well, every composer approaches music a little bit differently. And with Liszt, it's part of his process. It evolved. Liszt sees thematic transformation as a metamorphosis. That we start somewhere at the beginning, and then over time, we transform. What an amazing romantic idea. How timely is that with everything else going on, romanticism? And, The Wall, still, by Pink Floyd, still harkens back to this essential idea of transformation. So essential to it. But why don't other composers do it? Well, because some other composers have their own process. Take Tchaikovsky, for example, who we're going to hear at the end of this performance. A good friend of mine once said, Tchaikovsky doesn't use thematic transformation because Tchaikovsky's themes are already perfect. And they're perfect as a result of his process. Tchaikovsky just didn't sit down and go, there it is, Symphony number 6. It was a process. It evolves over time. And he crafts. That's really kind of the key word. Tchaikovsky is crafting these themes. And so he's working very diligently to come up with a perfect, brilliant solution. But he doesn't really show his work. We just get the solution. What we get with Liszt is the process. We can see where the themes are transferred, see or hear, or use those interchangeably. Hear how that transforms throughout the piece. And unlike theme and variations, where everything goes back to the default, with Liszt, they're interdependent on one another. Each transformation is only a partial transformation, which then gives way to the next set of the transformation. They're interdependent on one another. So what we have in this piano concerto, like I said, it isn't a fast, slow, fast, 3-movement piano concerto. It's a series of 6 iterations of thematic material, drawn out and spread out. So what that does is it changes the paradigm for the piano on the stage. Because Liszt wrote his first piano concerto to show off, because he could, because he was amazing. But the second one, he's in a different place in life. He's wanting to assert himself as a composer. Sound familiar? Last month we talked about this in relation to Brahms, because we did his second piano concerto. And it's a very, very different type of piece than Brahms' first piano concerto, which was kind of designed to show off. Brahms is asserting himself as a composer with Piano Concerto No. 2, and Liszt is doing the same exact thing. So he's integrating the piano into the orchestra in a much different way, because his purpose is different. What he's trying to communicate musically is very different than that traditional model.